Hi, this is Mark News from Plant Talk Radio. Thanks for subscribing and listening to our podcast, Your Gardening Questions from Plant Talk Radio. If you have a gardening question you'd like our host Fred Howard to answer, send him an email. The email address is fred@planttalkradio.com. Now for today's question. Carrie wrote in and says, I have a large area under an oak tree. It's pretty shady and hard to get grass to grow. Can you suggest a ground cover that would do well in the shade?
Well, yes, there are several, and happily so. Now, it depends on the density of the shade, and I'm going to let's just say, speak to arboriculture for a second, and that is perhaps the oak could be thinned out a little bit. And I don't mean chopped up now, but just thinned out, some few branches removed if they're too dense, get a little bit more light down through. It is possible then to raise the crown of the tree, depends on the kind of tree, proportions, and so on, but that's something to consider. Then we come to the ground cover parts. The first thing that I think of under oaks, because I so to speak, saw such a fantastic display of it years ago, Pachysandra. Pachysandra. Pachysandra is a ground cover that stands between 8 and 12 inches tall, usually in the 8 to 10 inch range. It is just now coming into bloom, at least here in central Ohio, and it's a plant that stands upright. It does not climb up the trunk of the tree. It is far less apt to try to creep out into the grass around this shady area and so on. So that's the first thing I think of. Then another denizen of the, let me explain why that plant. In an area, a large home, about a 2-acre front yard that was in all oak trees. I don't think a full strike of the sun ever came down through them. They had been carefully groomed and taken care of, kind of like I mentioned. And yet there was high ambient light under these oaks. There was significant competition on the ground, and the Pachysandra was just absolutely magnificent. So that's why that would be first. Then a plant that grows under oak trees in the natural woods in Ohio is myrtle. That's myrtle. It's dark green leaf. It is by some considered invasive. Now, if you have a spot such as this oak tree, I wouldn't consider it invasive, but it can keep crawling. It does not climb, but it can keep reaching out, touching down, and sending out new plants and so on. You can control that, the sharp spade or a lawn edger, under at least one oak tree and so on. Then, come on now. Pulmonaria. No. I'm sorry. My mind just went blank. I'll come back to it. But there is a perennial ground cover that is very barren in the wintertime, but it is also very, very good, let's just say shade plant. I know of a backyard that is quite shady. We worked with the couple things I've mentioned, plus some others, and we ended up using it, and I'll have to work on the name, maybe have to mention it later in the program, but that can work. Then there is always the old ivy that is very, very good grower. The only problem is it can reach out into the lawn quite rapidly, and it can climb the tree's trunk. So the main thing is to work up the soil under the oak only very shallowly. Plant the plants individually. Don't rototill the area. Just plant them individually and anywhere from 12 to 24 inches apart. I would recommend 12 to 18 as getting a ground cover quickly, and so on. So those three, or four actually, will do fine. And I'll try to think of the one perennial that can do such a fine job, but it's just not coming out right now.
Hey, thanks again for listening to our podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our other podcasts as well, the Plant of the Week podcast and the Plant Talk Radio podcast, all on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to sponsor a daily podcast, contact us at fred@planttalkradio.com. To find out more about Fred Howard and Plant Talk Radio, visit our website, planttalkradio.com.
Circle270media.com